88.9 FM, KXLU, and KXLU.com. All right, let me bring the music down here. We'll bring this down. Yeah, bring that down quietly. And now I'm going to bring this part up because on this other pot here on the board, we should have media archaeologist and swell guy Gerry Fialkaselzter. Are you there, Gerry?
I am indeed, Dan. I'm ready to go.
You can take it away, sir.
The power of pop music to corrupt and putrefy the minds of world youth is limitless. Hello, you are currently being recorded. Does this kind of life look interesting to you, lying in your bed in a semi-catatonic state and dreaming of metaphors that would irritate Nimrods? 200 Zappa Dan Rants. It's just as though Reverend Dan appeared on my very own radio in words of peace, love, and eternal cosmic wisdom. Thank you, Reverend Dan, for being our lifeblood. You are the Mother Superior, leading us in pseudo-karmic coolness. Hallelujah, hoodlums. We are family. As Frank Zappa's youngest daughter, Thin Muffin Pigeon Diva, recently appeared on YouTube throwing a mean tarot and crying. Tears, epiphanies in everydayness. My mother, Dolores Fialka, who named me after the patron saint of mothers, taught me that crying not only is an emotional release, but also gets toxins out of your body. Don't be terrified. Rejoice with laugh tears, a word James Joyce invented when he published Finnegan's Wake in 1939. A year later, Frank was born. Then in 1966, his first release, Freak Out, listed Joyce as an influence. Both Frank and Jim know all times are happening now, all at onceness. They both forgot to die. These adventures of Gregory Peccary tell us that we have invented the calendar to find out how old we are. How old is Music for Nimrods, the greatest rock and roll radio show in the multiverse? Gratitude eternal, Reverend Dan, for playing entire Zappa and Mothers of Invention albums, celebrating our soundtrack. When Frank was crossing the border once, the custom officer asked him, "Frank, what are you on?" Frank quipped, "I'm on duty." Just like you, Dan, you're on duty to play music during the middle of the night. You are on duty, dreaming awake. Finnegan's, wake up. Did you see the priest hold up the book Finnegan's Wake at Shane McGowan's funeral, the Fun for All service last week? My friend Nastasia, her nephew, was working in a Dublin hotel and delivered 10 Guinnesses to Shane's room service request. "Are you having a party?" Shane said, "No, I'm working." Just like it. In 200 motels, the sign, "Work liberates us all." Frank loved the Pogues, dirty little town. They shared Frank's sentiment. I'm very serious about not being serious. For example, please examine the Keep It Greasy outtake on YouTube. Just Frank in front of a microphone singing slobbering, and he cracks himself up. But the engineer misses it, and Frank says, "Oh, these Hollywood engineers, I laugh once a year and you miss it." Well, I guess God did not want it to be recorded. There's a lot of depth to that comment, Frank. Tom Waits said, "The best music does not want to be recorded. This is live radio. I'm trying to get more control over my spontaneity." Just as it is our duty to raise AI well, it's in its infant stage. You know, AI, auditory imagination, as T.S. Eliot calls it, or flip it, MCLUHAN-F to IA, Integral Awareness. Another recent YouTube channel, Rock Buzz, has an AI-generated Zappa voice reading a Hit Parader article that Frank actually wrote in 1970. My challenge to all you whiz kids coders is to get every Frank Zappa radio and TV interview into printed matter so that we can read them and search keywords. In fact, the site afka.net already lists every printed interview. The big note is Frank's resonating interval and then some. In fact, John Frusciante, the Red Hot Chili Peppers guitarist, studied Charlie Christian, and I recently helped him get some Frank Zappa scores to study in depth. John's relatives helped get a computer to Mae Brussel, courtesy of Frank Zappa. Study Mae Brussel, and don't fear AI. Use it to sharpen your critical skills. Frank Zappa promoted delving deep into research. Go to the library and educate yourself. You know, Harold Bloom said, absorb your influences, then abandon them. Echo said, stand on the shoulders of these giants and look farther. Learn new knowledge, and then unlearn it too. Everything you know is wrong. Check out my podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. A recent guest, artist The Spoon Man, tells a touching moment in the Utility Muffin Research Kitchen. When Frank praises Spoon Man, you don't have a commercial bone in your body. Reminds me of a discussion I had with a young new rock star. I told him, Frank Zappa says in order to be in the music business, you have to sell your cock and your balls. And the kid says, gee, I thought I only had to sell my soul. So do like Al Flipside proclaimed, don't sell out, sneak in. Paul Schrader said the role of the artist is to attempt to sell out, but fail. In fact, Frank retorted, I'm a failure, but not a miserable failure. Flip them breakdowns into breakthroughs. Reinvent questions that Frank asked, like in the song, Oh No. You say you think you know the meaning of love. Do you really think it can be told? Another important inquiry, who are the brain police? Cosmic scholar and experimental filmmaker Harry Smith was adamant. I saw America changed through music. Could I repeat that line? I saw American changed through music. Jonathan Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. Listen closely when Frank sings. Watch the Nazis run your town. Now go home and check yourself. You think we're singing about someone else. Frank Zappa always encourages registering to vote and voting. Get active. Do something. Counter this fascist theocracy. Another Swift, Taylor, can help. Fiancé, get these people to vote. Maintain your coolness and promote peace. Join us on February 25th at Venice West. I will open for the Stinkfoot Orchestra with a history of Frank Zappa in Venice, California. Conceptual continuity with Khalil Sabah, Susie Williams, and hopefully Tommy Mars. Susie and Tommy did Yo Cats 20 years ago at Cantor's, and you can see it on YouTube. The Stinkfoot Orchestra is a 16-piece band and features Napoleon Murphy Brock. Hear him on Room Service in the Roxy and Elsewhere album. And Dan, thanks for providing us Nimrods years of room service, because once again, you are the Mother Superior. More thanks to Gary Gutman, Mike Wilson, Simon Prentice, Mike Sakamoto, Paul Brewer, Fuji, and all the Zappa fans and family. Bob Marshall asked Frank Zappa about McLuhan saying, "Science is moving closer to art, and art is moving closer to science." Frank Zappa responded, "I think science is moving closer to weaponry, and art is moving closer to commercialism. And never the twain shall meet. Let's never stop moving the project object forward." Frank told us, don't stop and keep going. When he was asked, what is a genius? Frank said, a genius is someone who steals from others and you can't tell who he stole from. You know, Frank was a Spike Jones and Guitar Slim wannabe and throw in a lot of Edgar Varese. And Edgar nailed it. The present-day composer refuses to die. Frank blended matching and making, the magical, metabolical, metacognition mythologies, and transformed epic theater. In fact, Scott Tunis, who will also be playing in February at the Baked Potato with his band from Utopia, said he was inspired by Frank's real human storytelling in songs. You know, and here's the real big thing to remember, hoodlums. Wag the dog. Hey, Fido, go get my slippers. And vote. You know, WAG stands for Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia. We got to win. Hey, people, wake up. Vote. There's a culture of quantum fluctuations where you can only know that you have never seen what you thought you were looking at because you have never really heard what you're listening to. That's Arthur Croker and Spasm, virtual reality, android music, and electric flesh. But Captain Beefheart said, if you got ears, you gotta listen. In the LA Free Press in 1969, Frank said, the content of the album is completely irrelevant to the concept of the album. Frank requires audience participation with all your senses. Ears, sound, eyes, sight, hands, touch, tongue, taste, nose, smell. What is that stuff? Musk. Same thing the Beatles get off on. And what's the sixth sense? Well, maybe Warren Cucurullo said it best in the movie Baby Snakes. Everybody thinks Frank Zappa's a madman, but there are indeed notes involved. Frank was a maverick, a visionary. I was fortunate enough to ask the great jazz drummer Shelly Manne, what was it like to play for Frank Zappa? And he said, that guy knew what he wanted, and he got what he wanted. In fact, the only probably father-son team that ever worked for Frank, Don and Pete Chrislieb. When I asked Pete, what was it like to work for Frank? He said, he showed up looking like the office supply boy with a baton in one hand and a Les Paul in the other. Wow, what Frank history in L.A. L.A. Free Press, 1969. Frank mentions Pauline Oliveras' work with sound, above the audible and below, creating a mass. Frank said, not that it created a mass, it created something audible. It created and produced a some indifference tone which happened to be located within the audible frequency range. By combining something so high you couldn't hear it and something so low you couldn't hear it, it yields something in the middle that you could hear. Whether you liked what you heard in the middle is another question. The concept is brilliant. And so many brilliant people have passed recently. A special mention to Ezra Mohawk, who played at the Garrick Theater with the Mothers of Invention. This was Frank Zappa doing rock and roll theater off-Broadway in New York City before hair even opened. Also, Paul Plymley, a dear friend who was the Cecil Taylor of Canada. He called me often on the Zappa hotline. He was blending Herbie Nichols, Jimi Hendrix, Bucky Fuller, McLuhan, Joyce, Beefheart, and Zappa to create a whole new music. Like these folks, Frank did not die. They all live on. Frank uses comedy as a way of seeing and hearing the paradoxical exuberance of being through music, the big note. Music is the best. In token of my extreme, listen closely to these words. You don't want to know what's behind my eyes. And I'm forever perplexed in Gregory Peccary when Frank says, time is of affliction. Token of extreme. Some people think that if they go too far, they'll never get back to where the rest of them are. I might be crazy, but there's one thing I know. You might be surprised at what you find out when you go. What? Go too far or go after you die? To Gregory Peccary, does it matter that this wasted time is what makes a life for you? You know, to go full circle, I was a teenage dumpster diver. I was a teenage ne'er-do-well. I was a teenage media ecologist. And here's one for Frank. For you, Dan, I was a teenage hot dog salesman. Now, you know, Frank said art is making something out of nothing and selling it. So it's our job to reword all these Frank aphorisms. One of the most important is in 1966, the liner notes to Freak Out. On a personal level, freaking out is a process where an individual casts off outmoded and restricting standards of thinking, dress, and social etiquette in order to express creatively their relationship to their entire environment and the social structure as a whole. So be tuned in to what environments are created by AI, chatbots, radios, spoken word, printed word. So for our final benediction, we'll go back to Diva and her little tarot reading on YouTube. She says, I hope this resonates with all of you. With all the cups of the tarot in the spread, it is really clear that there is a fullness like no other that you are tapped into feeling. You are finding community. Hello, music for Nimrods, comrades, hoodlums. You are finding community and love in areas of your life you haven't felt, seen or recognized in before. Wake up, Finnegans. Your barriers are cracking with new light, the blue light. New life is transforming that space. So breathe and enjoy the new sensations. And as I prepare you for Dan performing one of the great Zappa pieces of all time at 5:20, Dead Air. Yes, Nimrods, we can breathe consciously and listen consciously to Reverend Dan, Cranking Frank. Thank you, Dan, and good night.
Oh, Gerry Fialkaselzter, ladies and gentlemen. Gerry, that was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan. I love you, and I love the Nimrods, and radio will live forever.
Bless you, sir. And then your podcast, where can we find the podcast?
I'm probably wrong about everything on YouTube.
Outstanding. Once again, folks, Gerry Fialkaselzter and his Zappa Dan rant for 2023. Thank you again, sir.
Thank you, Dan.